Hi everyone, I'm Priscilla Steffen here with the magical Harry Potter, Angella Johnson, for our Soul Profit Circle interview. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm an intuitive business strategist. And like Angela, I help people create magic in their businesses. And I do that from the lens of the soul strategy and the Akashic Records. And Angela and I go back when we met on our Akashic Records training, I think in 2013 maybe, or something like that. It was a long time ago. Yes, and we've gone through many different business and life changes. Angela was my coach when I rebranded from a health coach to doing soul business stuff. And she's a very potent, intuitive ninja, and also with a strategy, really knows messaging and marketing. She is a whiz at it. And I'm very excited to share with her story around her money story, which is powerful, and also how you evolved in business, because that's the thing too, is like, what do you do when the good shit stops being good shit? It's not working anymore. It's like, crickets, nothing's working. Freak out mode, I must suck. Business sucks. I suck at money. This thing doesn't work. So what do I do now? So I'm excited to have Angela share her story. And I asked her here because she has so much to share in just wisdom and life experience. You're celebrating your 10th year in business now, right? Which is amazing. Even with the events too, how, your first event, you lost $40,000, right? And then now you've made over $1 million in events and help other people do the same. And it's just, you have a lot of wisdom to share. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. And thank you so much for being willing to create this space to have a money conversation. A fellow contact we know, Carolyn Bottino, I'll give her credit for this. She said, when people talk about money, it normalizes the conversation. And we've got to start talking about it. We've got to start talking about the stuff that we've been sweeping under the rug or been told it's impolite or improper or, no, we don't talk about that in this household or as a community. It's like, no, look, we've got to start talking about it. Money is one of those things.
It is. Once we take the shame and the fear around it, there's so much space and freedom that gets created. And yeah, Carolyn's in the group. She's also been interviewed,
Awesome. Good. So everyone knows Carolyn then. Good.
Yes. So yeah, where would you like to start?
Yeah, let's start with kind of the Cliff Notes version of I never thought that I would have the money relationship that I have today. I just didn't think it was possible. Growing up, poor church welfare, I didn't know that you could buy clothes brand new until I was in middle school. It was basically the love of a local church and neighbors that sometimes had food on our table. There's one Christmas I remember, and I was very, I've always been empathic, highly intuitive. And I remember around one Christmas time, and there was just this sadness in our home. And I was like, what is this? And I was little. I was like, I don't know, probably maybe 6 years old or so. And it was just my brother and I. And what was happening is my mom was really worried about not being able to provide Christmas for us. And this is all like in hindsight, like after having conversation with my mom. And I just remember sitting there going, wow, this feeling is just like so intense. And there was a knock at the door. And so my brother and I, it's a couple days before Christmas, we go and our porch is full of boxes of food and presents. And some anonymous stranger left this on our porch. And I remember going, oh my gosh, we're going to have, and I'm thinking this as a 6-year-old, we are going to have Christmas. And my brother and I just have this memory, very vivid memory of my brother and I jumping up and down, squealing like, who delivered this? Oh my gosh, my mom's crying. My dad's working graveyards. He wasn't there. It was nighttime. And it was just like, and that was our reality of the kindness of strangers, the kindness of people in our church meant that we have food, clothing, and sometimes, could pay our bills. And so that was my reality. We just didn't talk about money. And, the other thing that I learned from this is this pattern of I can make it on very little. And so I've got to watch that in my business of like, I don't really need a lot of money. Like to live, like I don't need this, elaborate place to live, or I don't need all these luxurious items because I've had so much joy in my life with very, very little. And so there's nothing right or wrong about any of this, but it's an awareness of like, oh. And so even, my husband and I were looking at, buying a house and looking at square footage of homes. And I was like, two people do not need 4,000 square feet. And I go into this like, no, this is irresponsible. Like I can't have this. And so it gives me really great information. I use the access consciousness clearing statement. So whatever clearing mechanism you guys want to use, but like when you notice those patterns, just like, wow, everything is just a point of view. And so that's something that I've really taken a look at in the last couple of years of like, wow, I've done a really good job. I was taught by masters of how to create joy, how to make, get by with very, very little. And so that's a pattern that will still show up. Like, no, why do I need to make $30,000 in a month? When I'm thinking about like my first job out of college was $26,000 a year. I'm looking at like monthly income, and I was so grateful to make that in a year. And that was not that long ago, so I just think about like all of these pretty poignant, like pivotal experiences of like, and to have the relationship that I have with money. And it goes up and down. It's shifted a lot this last year. We'll talk about my business model shifting too, because that was a pretty significant shift of, do I really trust that money has my back? Do I trust myself with money? Do I trust that money will show up if I completely drop a business model that was working? I love what you said, like when the good shit stops being good shit, So anyway, so that was my experience as a kid. We did talk about money. I knew that money was a struggle. And I knew that, when I was asked to go borrow toilet paper from a neighbor because we didn't have any, that was a regular thing. And now it's completely different. My parents are doing much better, but it was really hard. And so I just look at that experience, and then my husband and I, and even just now, I just get these tears of gratitude, and we just look at our life of the places we've traveled and the luxuries that we enjoy, and the car that I drive, and the car that I drive that I don't have to worry if it's going to break down. And I don't have to worry if I, drive to California from Utah that I'm going to make it, when that was often a reason why we didn't take family vacations as a kid, because we didn't have reliable transportation. And so this is not about being a victim story or anything, but it's just acknowledging that it doesn't matter where you are, you can change your money reality. And I'll share a couple of things that specifically that I did that were pretty challenging. But even just acknowledging, like the other day, I talked with Carolyn, who's my bookkeeper, and we had this great conversation, looked at the profit and loss so far for 2018. And I was like, cool, awesome. And my old bookkeeper conversations would end in me crying, crying out of the stress, the shame, the embarrassment. And it was like, what am I embarrassed for? Like, this is when I had, a 6-figure business, and I was like doing well, but I still had all this judgment about it. And that my meetings with my accountant and bookkeeper would often end in me crying, and not tears of joy. And I was like, just the fact that I don't cry anymore when I look at my numbers.
Good progress. Yay!
That's a celebration.
It is. Wonderful. Yes. Yes. Freedom of the shame and that willingness to look at things, right? Carolyn talked about that willingness to just look at things. It's just numbers. Like, we can change it, right? It's not fixed.
It's just a number. But we identify, like, that's our identity, and that's who we are. And I think especially in this world of, entrepreneurs and I've looked at, like, gosh, do I share my numbers every month? Do I not? Like, what's the energy behind that? Because I'm sharing it to prove something, then that's actually not sharing, that's proving. And if I'm sharing just to share, like, there are all these different ways that you can be with your numbers and be with your relationship with money, and how you advertise it, how you market it. And you've got to choose what's best for you, and it's just a number. That number can change tomorrow. That number can change in 10 seconds. But it's your relationship and your own point of view about it, that's where it's either expansive and light in your body, or heavy and constrictive, and that shame starts coming in.
It's true. I love using the access consciousness part. With our book club for this first quarter was Money Isn't the Problem, You Are, right? By, I think it's Gary Douglas, right? Yeah. And I think it's in that book that they talk, he talks about, where are you making money more significant than you, right? And you're like, oh, and then just noticing, for me, it's been a pattern the last few months of noticing, like, usually when there's drama that comes up, I'm making something very significant. This has to work, right? This is the only way, or this person's going to be mad at me. Okay, I'm making this significant. And then there's this disconnect from personal power, right? And giving it to something else.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, because I love the whole self-worth piece, because I still have that where I deeply associate my worth with the number. Like, like if there's success on your own terms, and then there's, I feel in our industry, at least I'm speaking for myself, there are these milestones you want to hit, right? There's hitting those targets. I haven't hit my financial targets in 7 years the way I would want to. And so even though I've had a lot of success, and I'm saying this because there might be others, here that say like, this is an industry, especially many of us in the soul profit circle are healers and coaches and conscious entrepreneurs, right? We do it for the good and we want the money, or maybe we don't want the money, but it's okay.
Yeah.
But how do we handle, self-worth or not reaching targets, definition of success? How have you just dealt with this? Because I'm sure we're not alone, right?
For me, and I remember when I started in the coaching world and people were like, oh, 6-figure business. And what's your money goal? I'm like, okay, it's $20,000. And then I would feel nothing. I'm like, okay. And I had no connection to this number. But I'm like, I'm going to make $20,000. And then I wouldn't. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I suck. Like years, I'm going to set the number, this arbitrary number that sounds good. And I should want it. And it was a few years ago when I was really examining my money relationship, because I had the multiple 6-figure business. I had all these milestones, and I'm like, my relationship with money still sucks. And I have credit card debt that I'm not really happy about. And I don't know if I just wanted to pay for something, I can't do that because my cash flow sucked. Like all these things that it was like, nobody's talking about this. Like, yeah, I can look at my sales for the year and I'm like, and I'm paying coaches this amount of money. My events cost this amount of money. Travel to all these events I'm going to cost this amount of money. And at the end of the day, I wasn't paying myself. It was like, this is all bullshit. And I'm perpetuating the bullshit. So I've got to take a look at this. And so that's when I started taking a hard and loving and honest, sometimes not so loving, but I got there, look at like, what am I doing here? Like, what is this? Because if this is the relationship, and this is how I feel in my body every time I open my bills, every time I pay my bills, every time I get an invoice in my inbox and my stomach goes like that has to change. I'm not doing this anymore. And so a couple things that I changed. One of them was I didn't give a shit about the number. I let it all go, like 6 figures. And I was like the queen of like, here's your six steps to 6 figures. Like I was on that bandwagon. So I know it very well. And when I walked away from that, it was like, what brings me joy? What brings me joy? How do I want to work with people? What experiences do I desire to have? And so I started creating my budgets or my money targets by making a list of the experiences I wanted to have. And then I did, it was I had this, this is how geek I am. It was once in a journal. Like I'm not a journal writer. I'm an Excel chart creator. And so it's like the first column is what's the experience? Okay. How much is it going to cost? And why? Why is this important to me? And then the fourth column is usually, and what feeling or what do I think I'm going to get from this? And what I started noticing is it wasn't about the dollar amount. It was about freedom. It was about doing what I want to do whenever the hell I want to do it, with who I want to do it with, and being able to just choose and have more options available. It was like, and so once I identified that, it's like, oh my gosh. And then I started doing the research, and instead of like, oh, I just want to have this kind of car, I want to travel to Italy, or it's like, well, how much does that cost? How much does it cost to have someone clean my house twice a month? And what I found were all these things that I had this story about how hard it was going to be, how much money it was going to cost. It was all a lie. And I've had a housekeeper for I don't know how many years now. And people have their own thoughts about that. I'm like, it's 2 of us in a house. I can totally clean my own house. And I choose not to. And it's the best $200 a month I spend. Well, one of the best. I invest several things that bring me a lot of joy, and I love it. And so the why, like what's the why behind that? And if we're wanting to create something more in our business, and I've just recently gone through this, is my business just kind of like, yeah, okay, I'm paying my bills. I'm doing, like, it just wasn't like, there wasn't this big excitement of like, what am I creating for? And so now we're in the conversation, literally like in the last 2 weeks, of moving, okay, buying a house, like all these things. I'm like, oh, yes. And so, and just even the last, it's so funny we're talking today versus even 2 weeks ago, because this would have been a different conversation. But there's been all this energy igniting in my business, my body, my being, of just like, oh, I'm going to create this. This is so much fun. And this inspiration and creativity is turned back on. And my own, if I were just observe myself in this, why is that happening? Why is there this excitement about creating money? Is because I have a connection to what I'm creating. It's not just this arbitrary number. And so if you've had the money goals of like, oh, I should be making $10,000 a month, like, I just can't even handle when people like, this is what you should be doing. It's like, why? Why is that important? And it's also okay just to be like, because I want to be the kind of person to just know what it feels like. I just want to know what it's like. That's enough of a reason. But if you think it's going to change your life, or it's going to, the heavens are going to part and, something, no, I've experienced that, who I am today is the same person as who I was, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. I just have more choices now. I just have more choices, and that feels really good. Like to have choices, to know that I can create something beyond my circumstances is a really amazing feeling that I didn't know was possible when I was a kid. I always had that hope, or that I was like deep down, I think I knew, but that wasn't my reality day to day.
I love that. And so I love everything you said. And there's a gap, right? There's the reality we have now. There's what we think is possible. And then there's the anything is possible. So for someone that's thinking, well, great, Angela, I'm glad you got there. I haven't figured it out. Maybe I don't know what I want right now. Or I've tried the guru formulas and they haven't worked, and maybe there's some, like, how do I get from here A to B, right? And so you mentioned that connection, that energetic backing, which is someone else, another interviewee, Michelle Galati, said follow the energy of what's already got energetic backing to be created, right? Don't try to generate it. Like, where's the energy already there that wants, like, where does it want to go? Follow it, right? So, but you're here, right? You're A, and then you want to get to B. What have you done, or what might be some suggestions that come up to help people?
Well, create the chart or journal it, however you want to do it. If you want to geek out, create the chart of like, what's the thing? How much is it going to cost? Why? And then what's the feeling that you're after? Like, why is that important to you? That was a huge thing. The other piece, and I learned this through Access Consciousness, is create a having account. And I resisted this for a very long time. I resisted creating savings. And so when my husband and I got married, like, he's Mr. Saver and I'm spender. So my money type is like avoider, spender. And he's like saver, and like, what the hell are you doing? Like, why are you being a crazy person with money? And I was like, what's the problem? Like, live now, man, So that was an interesting dynamic, but even just having the space to have the conversation. So I'd say have more conversations in an environment of non-judgments, which is sometimes a tricky thing. But going back to the having account. So a having account is when we're, when I freak out, I'll just speak for myself. When I freak out about money, it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have money. And think like when we hear ourselves, I don't have money. And so creating a having account, and, the suggestion is 10%. I usually put 5%, and then I put 5% in a couple of other accounts. But to see that having account grow is amazing. So like when my main operating account gets low, I don't freak out the way I used to, because I see this having account growing, and I'm like, oh yeah. And for me just to go, see, I have money, and that can be my backup plan. But really the key with the having account is invest it in something that's going to appreciate and value, not just pay a bill. And so it's untouchable unless you're going to actually invest it in something. And it's just been an amazing experience. And I gave a loan to somebody that emptied out my having account. It was a couple years ago. And that was a really interesting choice. and it was guaranteed to be paid back. And they did eventually pay me back, but it was months later. And so again, that on my own awareness of like, oh, this is me showing me that, yeah, I can get by with very little. So this old pattern of like, I know I can survive on very little. I'm really creative. I can figure shit out. I had the best teachers, like really innovative parents to just figure stuff out. And so I just saw that old pattern. It was like, oh. And so in moments like that, it's like, okay, I could judge the hell out of myself and get mad. I could acknowledge I knew exactly that this was going to happen. And what else is possible? What can I create now? Am I willing to let go of that story that I can get by on very little? Because when I let go of that point of view and that story, then I stop creating that as my reality, and I stop creating experiences that prove to me, see, Angela, you can get by with very little. And so those are a couple of things, but having, creating a having account, if I said like one thing to do, it would be that. And I'll share this story. And this is like, it was kind of a, when a lesson just shows up multiple times, right? But I was at an event, these 3-day coaching events, and they were auctioning off a really, I don't even remember the name brand of this handbag. I don't know name brands. I'm like, Target? I don't know. But it was like a very expensive handbag, and every single month they would send it to the person, and you could bid on if you got March or April or whatever, and what you were submitting as your bid was actually going to build schools in Africa. And this was before I'd gone to Africa the first time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. And I leaned over to my friend. I said, I can't wait until I could just write a check and and it wasn't even about the bag. It was about, contributing and that, and I can't wait until I can just write a check to do that. And I was there at this event on my last $100. And she leaned back over to me. She said, how you do it now is how you'll do it then. And it was this moment of like, wow. So the other piece is I kept waiting for these large sums of money to save me. If I just created $10,000, then I can do this, I could do this, and da, da, da. And in Access Consciousness, we call this a causal reality. If this happens, then this. When instead of just choose the thing that you want to choose and stop putting yourself through all these hurdles. But that really simple and it wasn't said in a space of judgment. It was said in a space of total like allowance and love of just like, how you do it now is how you do it then. And I was like, wow, she's so right. Because if I'm not saving money now, or if I'm not paying myself now, there's not this magical number that changes that. Is our money just amplifies our habits. And so I really took a look at like, what are my habits? And I wasn't paying myself. I wasn't donating money to causes I believed in, even if it was $5. And so that was the day that I started donating to things that I was like, even though I quote didn't have it wasn't financially responsible, and how can I send money to people when I don't know how I'm going to pay my car payment this month? And it was that leap of faith of like, okay. And I stood up and I took the last $20 out of my wallet and I donated it to this cause. And it was like, and guess what? The money came back. Like it came back in other ways. It amplified in other ways. And so when I'm holding on to something, I'm hoarding it. The universe can't give me more of that. It's just like, there's nowhere for that energy to go, and then one final story, and then I'll, I'll shut up, but it's along the same point of, so when I did get to Africa for the first time, I was there for 2 weeks, and we would be on a project for 5 days, and then we would take a break for a couple of days. We needed a break for a couple of reasons. One, it was, incredibly grueling, hard labor. We were, chiseling floors and building schools, and it was physically the most exhausting thing I've ever done, spiritually exhausting, mentally, all of the above, like everything. And so on our final trip, after spending, almost 12 days on this project, we go to this, 5-star resort in the Mara to do a safari. And one of the facilitators of the group said, hey, so we've now seen people who don't have food. We know their names now. We've been eating off of like tuna packets and like just food that we could have on the job. And so when we go into this resort and you see these buffets of these buffets of food, and there's hot water and all this stuff, it's, you're going to feel guilty, and it's okay. And that was this moment I was like, what? Why would I feel guilty? I haven't done anything. I don't know what you're saying. And that's like this huge life lesson. And I went to Africa. I set an intention that I wanted to change the relationship with my body. I was in so much judgment of my body. and I wanted to change my relationship with money. And I went to on this trip, and it was just like, those are the two things that came up. And so when she said that, it was like, oh my gosh, I've been living my life that if I go without, then it will somehow bless somebody else. And so when I went in and saw this buffet of food, and it was gorgeous and wasteful, and all the judgments that came up, it's like, I'm not going to feel bad, because if I go without, it does not put food on Dorothy's table. What puts food on these people that I know their names now is for me to make a shit ton of money in my business and contribute it to the causes that I feel called to contribute. But by me going without to show like how much compassion I have or how much sympathy I have only adds to the suffering. And that was, again, it was like that one thing, it just shifted something so huge for me. It was like, wow. And it was like this permission slip that I've been asking for years of like, I just want to be okay with making a lot of money. And it's like, am I, can I do that? Again, that old pattern of you can do you can make do with very little, Angela. I was like, yeah. And you know how much good I can do if I stop apologizing for making money. And that was like, that was huge. And so even though I've had these experiences, I still have to implement them. I still get to up level my own money. They're like, and in fact, in March, just transparently, it was like one of the lowest months I've had in a couple of years of my business. And it was just kind of feeling this like, I don't really want to do anything. I was also in Costa Rica for 2 weeks, and I saw if I'm not present and actively working my business, it's not making money. It's kind of a problem. And so it's all an ebb and flow. I don't think that anyone who talks about money has like quote, made it forever. At least I haven't met that person. I haven't met that person, maybe Richard Branson or Oprah, but everyone, as Carolyn says, I'll quote her again, like everyone has a money story. Everyone does. And so what would you like yours to be?
She mentioned that. What's the narrative, right? That's guiding you. And she talked about remembering your money memories and the meanings you've created around the stories you've created and how that impacts your choices. And then guess what? You can change that story at any moment. Mm-hmm. Yep. Speaking to what you said, and thank you for sharing their beautiful stories, is I remember when I started my career, I worked at World Wildlife Fund for 5 years. And so it's a nonprofit, right? And so money is bad and, corporations are bad. It was just my thing. It wasn't even them. And I remember my dad said something. My dad was a very successful entrepreneur. I did grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. Mm-hmm. And then my mom said something to me. My dad said, Priscilla, poverty begets poverty. Meaning if you're poor, it's only going to create more of that poverty. Like being poor, like you said, is not helping anyone.
Right.
And then my mom said, Priscilla, yes, you can work for a nonprofit and go beg and fundraise to other people, or you can just be the millionaire and then you get to decide wherever the hell the money goes. Oh. And when she said that, I was like, oh my God, why didn't I think of that? But of course.
Right.
She would always say, her idea was go to Wall Street, make $1 million, and then, retire and then, use the money however you want it. Wall Street was not a part of my path, clearly, but, and I was like, of course, yeah, make the money. And it does feel really good when we do make the money, right? It's like, God, why would I not want that? And then, but anyway, so it's fascinating. I love everything. Thank you. So having account, I love that question. What am I creating this for in the business, right? What is that impetus? Is it fear? Is it approving energy? Is because you think it's going to work or it's going to get you somewhere? Or does it have that energetic backing? Like, does it want to go? Like she said, Michelle said, it's like an airplane. It's already on the runway. It's ready to take off. Versus, I got to pull something out of somewhere. I got to pay the bills. Like, yeah, not very inspirational, right?
Yeah.
And then I love, how money amplifies habits. Right, it's true, and I notice where I hoard. With our wedding, as conscientious as I've been, I asked the question, "How can I profit from our wedding?" That was been my question.
I love it.
But there's still this part of me. We have the money set aside. It was just like, but what if we spend it and then we don't make any more? Mm-hmm. I noticed myself hearing that. What if it goes and do I really need to spend like this much on food? Like, no, we can just get a little food truck, or something. And I'm like, oh my God, So just noticing all the little ways, or how when you're like, well, if I give this little much to charity, but then what if, I could use it somewhere else? Or as you were talking about the housekeeper, I love that idea. But because I hate to clean the house, and it's a big house, and it was just like, a part of me was like, but the responsible thing would put it in retirement and savings, because you can just spend an hour or two, but so there's that fight sometimes between how much do you save and be responsible, right? And then how much do you actually splurge? So how do you decide where you want the money to go?
Yeah. Well, I ask a lot of questions of, if I choose this, what will this create for my life and business in 5 years? And what that does is when we ask that question, it gets us out of this immediate kind of, oh my gosh. And it's like, wait, what will this create? What will this create? And so for me, like when I bought the car that I have now, it's, it's a Hyundai Santa Fe. So it's nothing like this huge luxury car. It has a panoramic sunroof, great stereo system, like butt warmers and hot steering wheel in the wintertime, like all these things that I was like, my car's fine. It's fine. And then I asked, like, does my body light up when I drive this car? My old one, it was like, no. It kind of looks like, no, it's practical. It's responsible. And, responsible is the ability to respond. So we actually misuse like the responsible thing to do. It's like, okay, so just take a look at that word wherever you're saying I should, or it's irresponsible, or I've got to do the responsible thing. Like that tells you you're in some sort of point of view that's actually not creating your life. It's usually decaying your desires instead of creating it. And so when you take a look at like, what do I actually desire? And so when I ask the question, if I choose this, so when I bought the car, if I choose this, what will this create for my life and business in 5 years? And it was like, and even the whole story of how the car came into my life and all this stuff. And it was like, wow. And it was, quote, irresponsible because, what I owed on the car that I traded in, like it didn't end up in my favor. So my payments were higher, like all the things logically that it's like, this just doesn't make sense. It was like, but it just feels super light and expansive. And when I drive that car, I'm like, the panoramic sunroof, and I drive through Utah and I'm like, this expansiveness is creating more for me and the planet and everyone around me than doing the responsible thing. So that's a question to ask. And then every time I invest money, like when I pay bills or, anything, wherever I'm spending money, I ask those dollar bills to go out and make babies and come back to me tenfold. I'm like, go duplicate yourself and come back. And it's like, I'm willing to receive it in whatever package it comes in, like just go out, make babies and come back. And for me, it's just funny. And I like chuckle to myself when I say that. I'm like, wow, I'm having fun with money. So it's like, some of the things is like, where can you trick yourself into actually having more fun with money? Because a lot of us, like, I actually don't really care about money, but I like it and I love it, but I don't really care about it. And so it's this very weird energy. But what I love about money is the options it provides and the experiences I can have and the places I've traveled to and the things that I can do for people. Like, that's what I love about it. And so just, those are just a couple of pieces. But I want to just go back to, your original question of like, okay, when you're kind of in it, whatever your money story is, like, how do you change it? And I just say, and as cheesy as this sounds, it's $1 at a time. Like if you're not saving money now, you're not going to save money when you make $10,000 a month or $100,000 a month. If you're not contributing or paying yourself now, you're not going to do that when you double your income. So like, where can you start? Just $1. And for me, that looked like I have my operating account. And then for me, I need to see it visually. So I have many sub bank accounts from events to, I probably have like maybe 8 or 10 right now. And then I just deposit that money. And so I can visually see it. And that's what I started doing. And I literally have one account right now that's called Magic. And this is where I'm investing in some things and it has $100 in it. And that's it. But I'm like, I'm going to start it, and went to the bank. And like, I'm opening up another account. She's like, what would you like to name it? I'm like, name it Magic. And she's like, what? She's like, who is this crazy lady that has an account called Giving Back Magic? okay, you're insane. I'm like, and you know what? There are thousands of dollars in these accounts. So who's the insane person, like, but it was really cute to see. She's like, magic? I'm like, yeah, magic. It's for the magic I'm creating in my life. She's like, oh, so you never know who you can influence by just opening a halving account or a magic account at your local credit union.
Wonderful. Now these sub accounts, so it's one account with multiple sub accounts. Is that what you did?
So I have one main operating account. That's where all the money comes in. So PayPal, Square, like everywhere I receive money comes into this account. And then just how it's structured is these are just sub accounts. So then I just transfer it into these other accounts, and I can get debit cards in those other accounts. And I just like to keep it really clear. Like I pay for my events out of my event account, and I'm not transferring money back and forth. I transfer it once and it stays there. Sometimes I'll like swap money around just to cover some things that that's, I think, just a given, but it's not this constant back and forth. But for me, for someone who avoided numbers, who never wanted to look at them, what is the system that makes sense for you? So when I visually look at this, I'm not confused. I'm not overwhelmed. I know exactly what's happening with all these areas of life that I'm creating for. And that was just a thing. And yeah, I pay more in bookkeeping. My accountant is like, why do you have so many accounts? I'm like, it's what works for me. Deal with it. Like, just deal with it. And people may not get it, but for me, that's what works.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And what about, when money is low, when there is an ebb, and and building that trust muscle, right? Still putting that 10% when you're like, pay the VA, have the halving account.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so that's why sometimes I won't do the 10%. Sometimes it's not even 5%. But it's like, okay, what's the habit I'm building here? Is it $1? Like I'm doing something to contribute to it. And so we can always do something. And when people say, and I've said this, oh, I can't afford it. What we're actually saying is, I don't believe in my ability to create it. And that, when we look at the truth of that, like, I don't believe in my ability to create it. Or the other thing is, that is just not a priority to me. And so both of those conversations with ourselves requires honesty. And so when we take a look at, where am I not willing to create 10% for having and my VA? And it's not about judging ourselves. It's like, oh, okay, so what else can I create? What else is possible here? Where is money just sitting in front of me that I haven't been willing to receive it or ask for it? And so those are some of the questions, that after I had my low month in March, I was like, yeah, that doesn't feel very good. I'm like, okay, what can I change? What am I creating? Like, what's so right there wanting to be created? Like, what can I do? And taking the space. And that was the other thing I realized. My schedule was giving, contributing to everyone else, but I wasn't having the space for me to create my own stuff. Emails, newsletters, sales pages, recordings of programs, like all the stuff that really is required in a business. It's like, yeah, I can't keep giving to everyone else, but not actually creating for myself. So I changed my schedule. So usually at least 3 days of the month, nothing. And it says in my schedule, my creation time. And so that's when I'm creating my programs, updating my website, like all the stuff, essentially the marketing stuff to help me create more money in my life.
I love that. And I know you said, some questions here about creation, like what wants to be created. And in my own records, what they said, what wants to come through you. And I've been playing with this notion, because there's our human agenda, the mind, the logic, create this, create to receive this result. But what if there's energies, looking to be created that we don't give space for? So I'm just curious for you. I remember last year, right, when you were beginning to change your business model, and I'd love for us to transition to that, where you said, God, there was a space of months where it was like nothing, like I don't know yet, or I know something, but I don't know the full picture. And in human design, I know you're a projector, I'm a generator, which I guess means that there are these, like you pause, like doesn't Chris say, go bake a cake until you figure out what you're going to do? Yeah. And I'm like, but the bills, like, and so and then, things don't maybe work as well when there's no energetic inspiration or backing. So like, what do you do when you're burned out, you're not inspired? What have you done to help with that?
Well, I'll talk about changing my business model and also another shift that I'm making like in the last week too. So a year ago, it was April, I hosted my Ignite event and I launched a program, and it was after the event, I was like, I actually don't want to run that program. It's like, really, I just dedicated like 3-day events to 100 people and talked about this program that I don't want to do anymore. And it was like, and so then when something like that happens, I ask questions now instead of, oh my gosh, I suck, or what have I done? It's like, is that really true? Or is it just resistance? So I really got to the bottom of like, what is this? And what I realized is, so my business model before was running 12-month programs and mastermind style. So very common in the coaching world. I loved them. Absolutely loved them. I loved the retreats that we had a couple times a year. I loved the connections I had with people. But I started seeing this pattern of I really had a hard time believing that everybody needed a 12-month program. And I started seeing where I was not willing to invest in a 12-month program, and willing to, because it was like, I don't need 12 months. I move really fast. And it was like, if I'm not willing to invest in this, can I sell it? And the answer is yes, you can, because everything is, you can do different things for different people. I think just this coaching jargon, but there was something else happening. It was like, oh, I actually really love teaching and not the coaching. Like, I do like coaching, but I love the teaching more. And most of my time was spent in long-term coaching. And it was like, So I just started noticing what was joyful, what was light, what was expansive for me. Where was my energy dipping? When I teach a class, I get off of, a 1 or 2 hour workshop. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, what's next? And when I would have a full day of coaching, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I need a glass of wine and some comfort food and chocolate and to go to bed. Nothing wrong with that. But I started noticing like this energy in my body is telling me something. So I made the decision to let go of my 12-month programs, which was 90% of my income. I let go of Ignite, the event I'd run for 9 years. And I had no idea what I was going to do next. And I was like, but in order to know, I've got to create the space to do it. I can't just do what's comfortable, what I know works, that's actually not working any longer. And it was a very subtle thing. It wasn't this it didn't turn into the 2x4 yet. So I was listening to the whispers and I was listening to that awareness. And what was really cool is all months but one, I had at least met the income that I had the year before by other projects. I took back, doing done for you websites, some copywriting projects, like other things. And it wasn't from this energy of, oh my God, I've got to make money. It was like, what's fun for me right now? Oh, I want to create a class about X. Okay, do it. And then 40 people sign up. I was like, wow, that was like one of the easiest things I've ever done. And there was several $1,000s from that. And then a website project and this. And it was like, And so I just kept asking questions. And now I'm in the place where I'm like, that's been awesome. And what can I create that creates a more consistent kind of monthly payment income that I'm not having to create something every single month? And that really showed up when I was in Costa Rica for 2 weeks in March. I was like, I haven't been as present in my business, and my income reflected that. So what can I create where even when I take 2 weeks off, the money is still coming in without me actively having to provide something to people? And so those are, and these are all things, like, I've been in business for 10 years. I know how this works, but you'll evolve. You'll change. When people, ask me like, do you see yourself doing the same thing in 10 years? I'm like, I don't know. Transforming lives, being in the world of transformation. Yes. Doing the exact same programs, products, and events. I sure the hell hope not. Like, I sure the hell hope I've evolved at some point to do something different than just the same old thing, right? And so letting go of the thing, like the shit that's good, it doesn't end up to be like as amazing anymore. It's like when you're willing to let it go, that's a friggin' huge leap of faith. I know it's scary. A friend of mine, she's selling a business, and she said, this has been my identity for like 10 years, 13 years. Like, how do I make money? Like, what do I do? I'm like, yeah, when you're in that moment, you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot how to make money. I actually called a friend. I'm like, I think I forgot how to make money. Like, I'm in this moment of like, I don't know what to do, because my, 10 years of I have an event, I sell a program, And if I didn't want to market anything the rest of the year, I didn't have to. And I was like, oh, how do I do this? So it was really an amazing experience to show me how to trust money, that yes, I create money and how to do that, that money has my back when I have my back. Like when I trust myself, then money comes into a place that there's trust. And so that could be and there's so many things we could go on and on for hours, but just maybe one of these things will just give you some of that awareness of like, And so the question that I've been asking myself a lot is, if I totally trusted myself, what would I choose?
I love when you ask that question.
What would I do?
Yeah. Because you've asked me that question over the years, like if you fully trusted yourself, and it comes down to this. For me, it's been, I think we all go through this lesson, right? In business, it comes down to us and how willing are we to trust ourselves, right? I meet with an astrologer this year, which is new, and I was telling her, yeah, but I don't trust the universe. I'm always waiting for another shoe to drop. That's just my narrative, And she said, so this isn't even about trusting the universe. Your lesson this year is to trust yourself. And I love how you correlated trusting yourself with then that reflecting into trusting money. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I was like, and so, yeah, it sounds so simple, right? And profound. And at the same time, there's my immediate question is like, how do we trust ourselves? How do we do that, right? So how have you trusted yourself, in amidst all of this?
I'm in the process of being able to answer that question concisely. And
Yoo-hoo!
I don't know that I can, because I think for every person it's different. And so for me, how it shows up is literally a moment-to-moment conversation with myself and asking a lot of questions. If I trust myself, what would I choose here? If I knew this was going to work out, what would my next step be? And we can ask this in marketing. I've been asking this in the last week with this house that we were looking at. And it's just like, wow, if I knew this was going to work out, what would I choose? What would I do next? And so even before we place, like we're in the middle of like, do we make an offer? Do we not? Like we're in this process. Like, do I trust myself? Do I trust that this is going to work out? It's like, well, if I knew this is going to work out, what would I do? Well, I would get a storage shed and I would start packing and stacking, as my real estate agent says. I'm like, yeah, that's the energy, that's the action I can take. Because you know what, if it doesn't work out, I can always empty the storage shed and move it back into my house. But what is the action that I can do? What is the thing that I can do? And I find that people a lot of times, and I've been an overthinker myself, we overthink the hell out of this stuff. It's like, oh, well, if I, no, it's like, no, what action? We've got to move that energy, put the energy, the vision into motion. Otherwise it gets stagnant. And how do we do that? By action. Just do something. Post something on Facebook about your services. Reach out to one person. Donate $5 to a cause that you believe in. Open an account, and this is your payroll account, and you're going to pay yourself $10 a month. Like, do something, anything, but get out of your head and into motion. So asking questions and just do something. Because the other thing I see when we do something, when we see ourselves like in our experience, then it's like, oh, wow, I just made this a whole big deal and it wasn't. I'm actually fine. I'm breathing. I didn't die. Like my worst case scenario, like it didn't happen. I'm not homeless. Okay, what's next? But we've got to see ourselves doing it instead of see the terrible story or the point of view or the judgment in our heads that gets really big, and it can be crippling. But it's like, how do we put that vision into motion through our action?
I love that. And what about because as you were talking about, if I knew this would work out, for me, in just honestly, I know in my head I have the potential to create some cool things that I want to create next. Mm-hmm. And there are two underlying energies. I don't know what I'm doing, right? I'm a total fraud. But speaking to it working out, I'm not sure it'll work out because it hasn't worked out the way I thought in terms of certain markers. Mm-hmm. So for you, when you've tried differently, like when the history has proven one result, how have you felt good about, okay, I'm going to, forget the past, I'm going to create something now in this moment. Like, what have you done? Do you understand the question?
Yeah. When I look at like, oh, it hasn't worked out, like what's true about that? And usually for me, it's nothing's true about that. I'm like, well, I haven't died. Like, yeah, I'm sure it's worked out if I did die, like, but I'm still here. Even if I have credit card debt, even if I'm not sure how I'm going to pay my bills, like, wow, I'm still here. I have consciousness. I have the ability. Like, what hasn't worked out? And I really like examine that. Like, wow, where am I judging what hasn't worked out? And it's like, I was even looking at my, my income for March, just as that example. I was like, wow, it's been a while since it dropped below that amount. I was like, huh. And then I remembered, I'm like, yeah, remember my first job that was $26,000 a year? like, look at what I've created. Like in a couple months, I've created more than what I made in an entire year. Like, so what, like, where am I judging the hell out of myself that's completely inaccurate? And so starting with acknowledgement, like acknowledge what you've created, acknowledge what you've survived, acknowledge what you've gone through and you've gotten to the other side, acknowledge all the fires you've walked through, and not acknowledge all the times you've been knocked down or knocked yourself down and you got back up. Like we have 100% success rate of getting back up. Every single one of us. Like that's pretty friggin' awesome. 100% success rate of getting back up. We may not be living what we'd like to be living. We may be stressed out. We might be sick. We might be tired, but we are breathing and we have the ability to create something different. And so that's one thing that I just tell myself when I'm in that, like, oh my gosh, everything sucks. I'm like, wait a minute, it has sucked a lot worse before. And I got through that. Like, this is nothing. Okay, what am I going to do today? And what was your other question? You said if it doesn't work out, what was the other one?
Oh, the fraud factor. Yeah.
Oh, so here's my secret trick for that when I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I believe in past lives. I believe we've had many, many lives. And so I'm like, truth, how many lives have I been a master with money? Or how many lives have I been an amazing public speaker? How many lives have I blah, 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 whatever I think I'm a fraud in? I'm like, oh my gosh, so many. I'm like, okay, so, and it's all happening now. Like we can get into all this weird conversation, but I ask the molecules that hold that information. Like, okay, drop into this life, drop into this body, into this business, into this bank account and show me. And it's this little magic trick that I'm like, I do know how to do this because I've done it. I've taught it. I've mastered this in other lives. And I'm going to recall that information in this life and we're going to rock it out. And whether it is just completely the placebo effect or whatever, to me, it's very much about using energy and molecules. Like everything's energy is everything. Like, oh, so wherever I'm telling myself, I don't know how, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm a fraud, I'm lying to myself. And what's heavy about when I say that to myself is when it's heavy, it's a lie. So I'm like, well, how many lives have I been a master at this? I'm like, oh my hell, so many. Okay. And it's not about doing it on our own, but it's like, okay, who else maybe knows more about this in this moment that can teach me? And sometimes it's my higher self. Sometimes it's, a past life. Sometimes it's a coach. Sometimes it's a colleague. Sometimes it's a book.
I love that. Question that popped out of the blue. Some of the favorite money books that you have enjoyed.
Oh, any money book with Access Consciousness, including the Money Isn't the Problem, You Are. I just started listening to You're a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. And not everything I agree with. Like she said, the most powerful way to change your thoughts is with affirmation. And I think the most powerful way to change your thoughts is through asking questions. Affirmations never quite worked for me. And she brings brilliant points up in this book. So I'm enjoying listening to that. And I'm trying to think of anything else that I've listened to or watched that I've really enjoyed. It's really those two. Like I've read a lot of books in the past that didn't quite work because I wasn't taking action. So I would just challenge yourself of like, if you're going to read or listen to a book, okay, what's one thing you're going to implement from that? So you're not a year later going, oh my gosh, my money hasn't changed, but I read all this stuff. I went to all these workshops, but we didn't do anything different. So what's one thing that you can do? What's one habit you can do?
How would you describe your relationship to money today?
Oh, today, it's been a little interesting this last week as we're looking at like a bigger mortgage and all this stuff. So I've been confronted with it. And so grateful. Like even with I'm being confronted and challenged and judging myself, every day I've been doing some different meditation practices, and I just end up crying tears of gratitude because I'm so grateful. Just so grateful of, you know, kind of the life that I described as a kid to what I experience now. And I'm 40 years old. It's like, wow, I've got a whole life ahead of me. Like, what else is possible now? I'm so grateful that I was willing to take a look at my money, and so grateful that I was willing to cry in my bookkeeper appointments and my accounting appointments. And I was so grateful that I was willing to open bills that I had no idea how I was going to pay, that I was willing to look at myself in a different lens. And so long answer to that question is grateful, excited for what's possible. And there's I don't know if I have the words for it, but this energy of I'm willing to do whatever it takes. There's a willingness to have these things that I put on the like peripheral. Like, can I really have it? Because I can get by with not very much. Like, that's been a really big conversation for me in the last 10 days since we've been looking at this house, and possibilities of changing our life and changing where we live and changing our view, our physical view, literal view, which would, you know, is very symbolic of things that we're creating. We, as in my husband and I. So.
Yes, and gratitude is a big one, right? It really does create expansion. There was something else based on what you were saying that I wanted to say, but and there's that old saying, right? What you appreciate appreciates, and it does help. This is what I was going to say, and it's, I know it's easy sometimes for us logical overthinkers, myself definitely in that pack, to go into the how. And I would say that when instead of maybe focusing on the how, maybe just really lean into the willingness, or choosing, if you want, to be willing to change. You know, the willingness is what creates the space. The willingness is what diminishes the resistance, right? It's that willingness. You don't need to know how, just be in the energy of possibility of willing.
Yeah. I'm so glad you talked about willingness, because that's huge. And so Carolyn, you know, maybe Carolyn's ears are burning because I'm going to mention her the third time. So we were chatting about, you know, the goals that I have for my business and numbers and moving. And she said, you know, just find out what it would take to buy a house right now. Just like, you don't have to do it, but just find out, just start the process. And I have this huge story in my head about, well, a self-employment income, and I'm going to do this. And if I pay myself more this year, then the tax, you know, consequence is about $50,000. And I don't want, you know, it was all false. It was all complete and utter bullshit, but I was making it my reality. And so when I just started looking into it and it was willing, it's like, hey, you know, willing and not attached. Wow, our house has 4 times the equity that I thought it did. How did that happen? Oh, my credit is 50 points higher than I thought it was. Okay, and I've been actively working on all these things, like paying off credit card debt, like these different elements that I know are going to be contributions, and things that I chose to do. Like, I'm just going to start getting the house ready to sell. And I've been taking, like, going through rooms, like, I'm willing to do this, and I have no idea how it's going to show up. And I have been like, just, my mind has been blown wide open, heart exploded with like, wow, like this is working out better than I ever expected. I was going to make myself wait another year to do this. I was willing to consider a different possibility, willing and unattached. And it's been amazing. And so it's really been teaching me a lot about my money relationship, the other experiences I'd like to have in addition to a house change. Like, am I willing to really have these things?
Yes, and I noticed yesterday I was on a money call with someone that hopefully will be interviewed here, and she just talks a lot about law of attraction, and she says, well, you know, you can have anything you want, so I'm just having it, right? I'm just choosing it, like you were saying. And she said, you know, I barely hire, you know, people barely talk to me anymore. They just know they're going to work with me, and they just pay, and they pay me in full. And I got so triggered at the end of, you know, and I just kind of had a bit of a meltdown yesterday. And it was just the awareness of all the ways that I put up barricades right? Like, oh, like points of view, conclusions, limitations, stories about why it can't happen, why I have to do all this work in order to get it, right? And like you, we did the same thing. I was actually at Carolyn's house, right, a few weeks ago, and it was this beautiful house, and I've been, I always contemplated the story of the potential of us having a house. I don't know if it's the right time or where we know where we're going to live, all those things, but like, God damn it, I want to know I can have the house.
Yeah.
But San Diego houses are not cheap, right? We live in the Brady Bunch house here, and it's probably like $750,000 without remodel, right? So I was like, this house is not really worth that much. And I just remember leaving her house so happy for her and thinking, oh, I can't have that yet. And I was like, fuck that shit. And so I was on retreat with some friends, and she happened to be a real estate person. And I said, look, this is how much Alex and I make, and this is what we have. But I thought you needed to have 20% down, and she's like, well, actually, that isn't true at all. I was like, bunny ears just went like,
Yeah.
Really? And Alex and I talked, and like, we don't know yet. I said, but can we agree that we can make an informed decision without deciding? Because I said, at least we won't regret it, and we'll be on the same page. So we will be likely meeting with a lender just to explore what is possible. And then we can see what's light, what's heavy, if it's for now, if it's for later, probably for later. But at least we're willing to look at it, because I'm like, I'm not going to say no. I did this a long time ago when I lived in Washington, D.C. I didn't think I could afford it, and I could have, and I regretted it because the real estate really appreciated. So the point is, don't assume.
Yeah.
Ask some questions, figure it out, make informed decisions, right? Don't assume anything. Don't assume that because of your credit, maybe you can't get another credit card, or you can't refinance that loan, or you can't get a 0% credit card. I mean, don't assume anything.
Yeah, allow yourself to be pleasantly surprised. And the only way that happens is if you actually take this step into the unknown. So like my husband, his human design is generator type. So he's very much like very methodical. He takes time to process, and I move really, really fast. And so this whole house conversation, like I'm like, honey, just breathe and don't hyperventilate. Like, I've got all the details, like your job is just to manage yourself, And so for him, he's like, but how is all this going to work? And, like selling a house and buying a house at the same time. And how does that timing work? And where are we going to live if the time doesn't match up? And then renovations on the new house. And I'm like, I know it's a lot, and changing jobs. And like, I know. And we won't know until we step into it. We cannot know how all this is by thinking about it, or, all the hypothetical possibilities. Like, what are we willing to do? Are we willing to live in your parents' basement for a month until one house is ready? Like, are we willing to do like the unimaginable? Like, are we willing to do it? Not that we'll choose it, but what are we willing to do? And when we start exploring what we're willing to do, we're like, oh, I'm not going to die. Like, it's not actually going to be that bad. How much fun can I have while creating this magic? And it never ever shows up the way you think it will, ever. And so are we willing to allow ourselves to be pleasantly delighted and surprised, and just like, it's so much more awesome than I ever thought is possible? Like, are we willing to have that be our reality? And it's just the willingness to just be willing and take that next step, and just kind of like look around, put your toe in the water. But we don't know how cold the pool is by someone telling us, or our minds telling us. We have to actually put our foot in the water. Like, oh, this is way better than I thought it was. We don't know until we actually are willing and just moving into that energy. Put that energy into motion. Do something with that willingness to.
I agree. And I love the access question too, right? Truth, is this for now or is this for later, right? That can also help, right? To decide, is this really the time? And then ultimately you can figure out the details. With our wedding too, it just felt like it was the right time. We didn't have all the money. The money came through 2 months after we decided. And I was like, we're going to figure this out. We're not going to go into debt. We have the money.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it all happens, right? Because we were clear, and then there you go. And I was like, we cannot wait. We have to do this. He's like, no, now is the time. I said, we'll figure this out. And boom, the money just plopped in through unexpected, sources. And that was it. It's done, we went from, we can't afford this yet, to, oh, we can totally afford it. I mean, just like that, right? But we chose it. But we chose it. And it's funny, I don't know if you know this, really quickly, Angela. I had someone do my human design for a couple, Alex and I.
Oh, cool.
Did you know that your human design as a couple can be different than two individuals? So Alex and I are both generators. But when we partner up, we create the manifesting generator energy.
Oh, how cool.
So, which means that once we team up, things move really fast.
Yeah.
And we have that same gut check. It's really cool. So maybe, something to consider.
Yeah.
See how yours and your hubby's energy, if there's I was like, anyway, but that's just cool. So, last question real quick is, what are you excited to spend money on next?
A house, furniture, mid-century modern furniture, a new kitchen, a trip to Australia, Kenya, and Italy all this year, just to name a few.
Yes, that sounds delightful. And I know you have a free gift for people. So what is that?
Yeah, so as a business strategist and intuitive, I love the words business alchemy. So it's how to create change, what we've talked about today in your business. And I talk about the 5 elements to create that change. It's like going back to basics. Magic is one of the elements. And so when you go to angellajohnson.com, you can download my guide and it's a PDF and an audio. And I'm really excited about this body of work that I'm newly just putting out to the world. But it'll give you some insight as far as how do all these elements put together, and simplifies it so that you can create more joy and profits in your business.
Yes, and Angela is a fabulous teacher. She will break it down in ways that honors you, that allows you to do it your way, and to have fun and play with energy, and also be highly strategic and profitable in the process. So that sounds wonderful, AngelaJohnson.com. And for you and your viewers, when you share, I'll be sharing, I don't know what yet, from the Soul Profit Circle, which is some tools to help you have an empowered relationship to money. And I know, Angela, you have your money club that was the inspiration for the Soul Profit Circle. We just use different tools. You use the Access Consciousness tools. I use the Akashic Records. But even as you're listening and you go on Angela's site, and if you're inspired from my group, to check out her work, if that speaks to you, then choose that. Just see what speaks to you in all of this. This is about sharing resources that will move you forward, whoever that comes from. And if there's anything about the Akashic Records that inspires you, or that you're interested, like what is Soul Profit or any of that, feel free to check out the work in the circle that we're doing. We talk about purpose, leadership, and profit, and how you can do that from this inside out, from your soul. So, and I'm at PriscillaStefan.com if you also want to learn more about me. And thank you so much, Angela. I know we went a little bit over time, but this was so fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the conversation. And thanks for people who are listening to be willing to have conversations with yourself and loved ones about money. This is like, we can create a lot of change by just the willingness, going back to willingness to have these conversations.
Yes. And what else is possible now, right? Exactly. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.